Legislators are being asked to approve a bill that would make state funds available for parents who want to send their children to private schools. Will it pass? For decades, efforts to bring horse racing to Georgia have gone down in flames, defeated by anti-gambling forces. The issue is back at the Capitol again this year. And at what age are children really ready to go to kindergarten? One legislator wants to change state law to mandate later entry. Lawmakers starts right now. Good evening and welcome to the Lawmakers. I'm Bill Nigut. We are at day 15 of the 2015 legislative session, and education issues loom large. We're going to look at a number of school-related issues tonight. But first, tonight's Capitol Report with Pat St. Clair at the state Capitol.
Thanks, Bill. We begin tonight in the Senate, which voted on anti-sex trafficking legislation sponsored by Senator Renee Unterman. The measures would increase penalties for pimps and would provide more protections for underage victims of sex trafficking. The senators approved both measures, saying they wanted to send a strong message.
You know, a few years ago, we talked about drugs and people who sold drugs. Well, now the people aren't selling drugs anymore. They're selling people. They're selling humanity because it's much cheaper. And the war on drugs is still going, but now we got a war on humanity.
Unterman made an impassioned plea for her bills. There were no questions from other senators, only strong support.
The impact and the depth of this bill is immeasurable on young lives. Young, innocent lives. Lives that are being ruined, lives that are being exploited, lives that are being stolen. We have an opportunity today to help change that. We don't need just the requisite 29 votes. We need a unanimous vote.
The message from the Senate today that we are the #1 place in the world to do business, but we are not the #1 place in the world to do this kind of business. We will protect our children.
The final vote was 52-3. Senator Unterman says she was overwhelmed at the backing from her colleagues. There was also a strong show of support outside of the chamber from several groups of high school students. Alan Lee is with the South Atlanta School for Law and Social Justice. He brought students from Benjamin Banneker High School, kids who are the same age as many of the sex trafficking victims.
We brought students down in support of Senate Bill 8 and House Bill 244 to show that these are some of the students that could fall victim to sex trafficking, and we want to say that all together we support the government in providing more funds to support the victims.
So this was an opportunity for them to kind of see how the legislative process works, right?
Yes. So we have here some of our students from various areas, including our AP Government class and AP US and AP World, and we want them to see hands-on, this is how government works. We're a school for law and social justice, so we want to see laws being made, and we want the students to have an experience in participating in positive social change.
The legislation now goes to the House. Also today, the House Transportation Committee began looking at HB 170 for that huge transportation funding plan. The debate is perhaps a preview of the opposition on the road ahead.
This is still a process. We're still considering any and all ideas.
Sponsor Jay Roberts presented the bill with amendments and tweaks made to address concerns. Among the speakers, Michael Sullivan, who chairs the Georgia Transportation Alliance. He says in general they support the legislation, but he cautioned the lawmakers against trying to fight the last war.
This is not 2012 when the response was no. The response now is a legitimate response of acknowledging that there is a problem and acknowledging that this problem needs a solution. And there are folks that I think are very willing to engage in that discussion and that process.
The Georgia Motor Trucking Association is also on board with one major exception. Ed Crowell explained a portion of the bill dealing with increasing the state's excise tax hurts truckers.
I can tell you the numbers are staggering. Hundreds of trucking companies have policies do not buy fuel inside Georgia. One of the largest trucking companies in the state with 2,200 vehicles has a penalty for their drivers if they fuel up in Georgia. And it is all because of the paperwork that's required in the International Fuel Tax Agreement. Doesn't affect cars because cars don't do that. They don't report that paperwork.
A number of healthcare organizations also asked for changes to the bill, including the American Lung Association and the American Cancer Society. They want to see the cigarette tax increased to fund part of the transportation bill. This was an informational meeting and no vote was taken today. And looking ahead to next week, we expect continuing debate on the governor's education plan and those recovery school districts. Also, Democrats are expected to unveil their own education plan. Bill, back to you.
Thanks, Pat. We're going to kick off tonight's discussion with some interesting new issues surrounding state education policy. Joining me for that, Liz Flowers, Executive Director of the Georgia Senate Democratic Caucus and a media and government relations consultant. Leo Smith, the Director of Minority Engagement for the Georgia Republican Party, and Greg Bluestein, political writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thank you all for being here tonight. So let's start with this conversation about what we call school choice. So imagine a pre-tax system like a health savings account. In this case, it would be called an education savings account, and it's a new version of school choice as imagined by Representative Mark Hamilton. So, Greg Bluestein, let me go to you first. Help us understand what Representative Hamilton really has in mind here.
Yeah, he doesn't want you to use the V word, voucher. He says it's more like a health savings account, whereas the school education funding formula in Georgia usually doles out $3,500 to $5,000 a year per pupil to attend Georgia schools. He'd rather that money go back to you so that you can spend it on, say, homeschooling, private school, or other educational alternatives. And
it would, so you're essentially using your own money, but it's you got the benefits like an HSA of it's pre-tax dollars and then it's a tax credit on the other end as well.
Yeah, and his argument is if it's money that you're already spending in public tax dollars that would send your kid to public school, you might as well use it for private school or homeschooling or other alternatives. So,
Liz, Greg just said that Representative Hamilton doesn't want us to use the V word, voucher. What's wrong with the V word? What's wrong with vouchers? And is this one?
Well, rose by any other name. So in our estimation, it's still a voucher. And it only is applying to a very small percentage of the population. People need to remember that vouchers don't pay for the entire cost of a private tuition or homeschooling or anything else. It's only a small portion. And so for a family who's struggling, a working family, you're only going to get a tiny portion. You're not really going to be able to send your kid to that institution. So it's only going to impact probably some of the most wealthy Georgians.
Well, but let's unpack a little bit about what you just said, Leo. First of all, Representative Hamilton essentially wants to start this, if he can pass it, very, very slowly. In the first year, I think it would only affect some 8,500 students, and at 0.5% of Georgia students. In the second year, it would double that. So this is more like a pilot program than it is a program that it's intentionally going to, at the beginning, only reach a small number.
Yeah, the more I hang out with legislators, the more I'm realizing that there's a lot of inspired pragmatism going on as it relates to education. I was once at a Georgia Public Policy Foundation breakfast, and someone said that Georgia didn't have any vision on education. And now you're seeing all these bills related to sort of shaking up the system and figuring out ways to give more people, private public partnerships, and parents themselves ways to invest and to take personal ownership of their child's education. And I think that's what a lot of people are trying to do, to create these opportunities where people can personally invest and sort of have a relationship with the money that follows their child. And they do see that as that's their money. Whereas I think there is an argument out there that it isn't their money. And that's where the whole concept of vouchers starts to be argued, that this is not like the money that you use in a flexible spending account for your medical costs.
This is going to be a tough sell in the legislature this year for the very reason that Governor Deal has said he's a supporter of school choice and everything he's done is sort of gone down that path. But he also wants lawmakers to focus on the initiative he actually unveiled yesterday for the first time, right. the Opportunity School District legislation, constitutional amendment, which is going to be a tough sell on its own. He set up an education reform commission that would spend the next year or so, actually next 6 months, and have recommendations by next year for education initiatives, for the school funding plans, and for other delivery methods, which could include this.
Right.
That's why this might be a 2-year plan rather than a thing proposal for this year.
But it does seem, and this toss-up question, please grab it, whoever wants to. It does seem, Greg, to continue with your point, that at a time when the governor is touting the new public monies he's put into education, the pride that he says he feels that he's been able to inject the schools with money that wasn't available during the recession, that this is an odd piece of legislation to come up because this money essentially takes away from the public education system, doesn't it? Or
well,
am I misreading it?
No, you're not misreading it. And I'm sure as we discussed last night, I mean, coupled with the governor's education program, this is the continued siphon off of the public school system, which is our baseline. Everybody gets that. And everything else, in our estimation, is sort of an add-on. But the other piece of it is that individual legislators hear from their constituencies. And so someone may have come to an elected official at any point during the year and asked for this to be brought forward. So you can't control the whole legislative body.
So before we move on, though, Leo, I think you said something important. The reality here is this is a small program, a small project. It would start very slowly. It's the larger philosophical question that you really are addressing here. That's this notion that parents living in a state that has had such trouble developing quality education in its public schools, people seem to be crying out for some alternative. And so in some ways it's philosophical as much as practical, isn't it?
I think you're right. And I think when you give people a sense that they can actually make a difference in education for their children based on the decisions they make, even financial decisions early on in the game, that those parents will actually have more affinity towards whatever educational choice their kid's actually in, their child's actually in. And in many cases, a $9,000 private school with a $5,000 surplus, a supplement, actually then becomes affordable, and they have more choices and options because of that. And so it could make a big difference in creating a sense of choice and satisfaction with choice from parents.
All right, last word on this, though. Wrong philosophy from the Democrats' point of view?
You know, I don't think it's wrong, and I understand where Leo's coming from on this. I think that the point becomes is that our elected body needs to help serve all Georgians, not specific segments of the population. And so I don't think philosophically overall it's wrong. I think if we're only serving a tiny few, you have to look at whether it's good for Georgia.
All right. You think this is unlikely to get very far this session based on what you're observing as a reporter down there?
Yeah, just based on Governor Deal's comments saying that he wants pretty much all of the education initiatives that aren't this constitutional amendment that we heard about last night to be shelved and studied for the next 6 months by his Education Reform Commission.
All right, let's move on with another subject related to our schools. And Greg Bluestein, I turn to you first and foremost because you are down at the Capitol covering it every day, but you go home at night to a house full of very young children. How old are your kids right now?
4 and 1.
Okay, 4 and 1. So we now have a bill that's been proposed by Eric Sturgis, right? Sturgis?
Oh, he's the AJC reporter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I knew that. Go ahead.
Mike Dudgeon was the sponsor.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Eric has been writing about this, I think.
He is all over it now.
Go ahead. Talk about this.
Well, it would allow kindergarten students, it would require kindergarten students to be 5 years old by the time they're admitted to kindergarten. And it's one of those bills that we've heard about at birthday parties and at events. It's one of those bills that's a talking bill. There's a lot of angst about it from especially from parents of young children who are worried that they'll have to figure out another year for their kids to be in a daycare program.
So right now, you have to be 5 by September 1st. Is that what the state requires right now? And this bill would say it would pull it back 2 months to July 1st. Is that basically what we're talking about?
Yeah, there's been different iterations. One was July, one was August.
Okay, so you're right. There are parents out there who are going to say, my gosh, I was planning on being able to get my kids out the door as quickly as possible. What's the right age? I mean, how young can you put a child in kindergarten and expect them to perform?
Well, so this isn't a new argument. My baby is 26 years old, and we had the same decisions that we had to make when he was 5. I mean, there's a body of evidence that says, boys don't start school as quickly as girls. You should pre-test your children, and I did that with my son. Pre-tested to make sure he was ready to start. So there's all that's a 20-some-year-old, probably longer argument. I think what we have to get in here is the pragmatic issue of what are we doing to fully fund pre-K, because we've got waiting lists for our pre-K program. Now we're going to bump more children potentially into that for a second year, a second cycle if they don't meet that. And then there's this gap time where kids are not going to be able to sign up for that, and parents are kind of left wondering, how do I continue my child's education the next year?
Yeah.
And with that, this all has to roll into this overall reshaping of funding and how we think philosophically about education and what Georgia's willing to commit to, including, what laws are we willing to shape and change, because you can't make those decisions without looking at the QBE as well. And so all of these things are all going to fall under that. And I think Governor Dills is bitten off a lot when it comes to education. He's got a lot to chew on.
Well, so how is this going to be resolved? In other words, what are the issues that are going to really shape how this is resolved and how legislators act on this?
Part of it's going to be a battle of the experts in some senses. On one side, there's experts that say the earlier the better, and that, the earlier a 4-year-old gets in some sort of structured classroom, the longer the long-term achievements for them. And there's others that say that some 4-year-olds just aren't equipped right now to be in a kindergarten classroom.
Yeah, so this isn't a partisan issue. This isn't an ideological issue.
I don't think
in many ways, this is a kitchen table issue, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is kitchen table, but it is also funding.
Yeah.
And I think that a larger topic to explore is how much money that the Hope Scholarship Program is sitting on right now in reserves that could be used to fund the gaps in this program.
That's an interesting point of view on this, because I remember very, very well, and I think you do too, Liz, when Zell Miller rolled out the Georgia lottery, he was deeply committed to using that money, not just for the Hope Scholarship for college students, but pre-K was a crucial part of his strategy, and it hasn't really developed that way. The money has, for a lot of reasons, political reasons, it's much more invested in Hope than it is in pre-K. Yes?
Well, it is, and in Hope in only in certain regions of the state. So it's a very large issue, but yes, he absolutely targeted that. What we all know, I think what every educator and professional would say, is that the earlier we can start learning with children, the better everyone's going to turn out. The question is, how much are we going to sit on reserves? How much are we going to focus towards that program? And this is a perfect way, looking at this legislation, to fill a gap of saying this is the perfect time to expand pre-K.
Greg, is enough developed in terms of conversation about this that you have any sense about how legislators might be leaning on this?
No, it's the same as the last bill, too. A lot of these issues, and this one might be another one for the Education Reform Commission, a lot of these issues might need a little more vetting. Already, Mike Dudgeon, the sponsor of the bill, has delayed the bill's implementation to I think it was the 2017 school year. So they're trying to push it back to give folks more time to review it.
All right, so we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a subject that's been batted around for years, horse racing in Georgia. And by the way, Eric, I'm sorry I put you in the legislature. You're still on the right side as a journalist. Still ahead on Lawmakers. It's a proposal that's been around the track more than a few times. Is this finally the year for legalized horse racing in Georgia? Back with that in a moment. And as we go to break, the not-so-secret identity of one prominent Georgia legislator. Representative Stacey Abrams is a Democrat from Atlanta. She represents House District 89. Abrams was sworn into the General Assembly in 2007. She has the distinction of being the House Minority Leader. She's the first woman to lead either party in the General Assembly and the first African-American woman to lead in the House. Her list of accolades, degrees, and honors is long and distinguished. But one of the things you might not know about Abrams is that she moonlights as novelist Selena Montgomery. She's a writer of romantic thrillers such as Secrets and Lies, Never Tell, and Hidden Sins. May we humbly suggest the title 50 Shades of Gold for a future project? We'll be right back. In Georgia, the governor cannot veto proposed constitutional amendments that pass the House and Senate. If a proposed constitutional amendment passes both chambers with a 2/3 majority, the measure then goes directly to Georgia voters for final approval. And that happens to be a great little factoid for leading into our next conversation. There are a number of proposed constitutional amendments so far this session. One involves a state gas tax. Another is about failing schools, and we'll see how those play out. Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Bill Nygett. Here tonight, Liz Flowers, Executive Director of the Georgia Senate Democratic Caucus, Leo Smith with the Georgia Republican Party, and Greg Bluestein, political reporter with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So, one of those constitutional amendments that we want to talk about tonight is another effort, Greg Bluestein. I've been in Georgia for 31 years, and I think virtually that entire time somebody's been trying to put this on the table. Parimutuel wagering, horse racing in Georgia. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, we've seen, I think, this for at least the last 5 or 6 years, but probably for more than a decade. Representative Harry Geisinger is the main proponent behind it, and he wants to legalize parimutuel wagering, horse racing. He thinks there could be horse races throughout North Georgia. It could be a boon to the economy, and it could help fund the Hope Scholarship.
Yeah, Leo, this is, again, an issue that's been batted around forever. But it never gets very far because of people who are terribly concerned about allowing gambling in Georgia, primarily conservatives and Christian organizations, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a strong presence of conservative citizen activists, I would call them. They're not officially lobbyists, but some of these people will, venture to drive up here 4 days a week and rent hotels to make sure that things like this don't happen.
Well, you don't have to be a lobbyist to be a Southern Baptist minister preaching on Sunday morning about the evils of gambling. Right. That goes a long way, doesn't it?
Absolutely it does. And so, whether they live in Alpharetta and in the horse country of Georgia or, down southern Georgia, I think that this is going to be something that continues to be put on the docket once in a while or talked about, but I just don't see it happening anytime soon.
So, Liz, there's a couple of interesting wrinkles in this. The notion of the state reaping some money itself in revenues that could be used for Hope scholarships, maybe for pre-K, right. Is one argument. But that's been used before. There's a newer one, and that is the fees that can be collected by stud farming, by putting horses out to stud. And that's an enormous business. And to the best of my knowledge, it's the first time that's really been used in an effort to get legislators interested in this.
Yeah, quite possibly. And I will be the first one to tell you I am not an expert on stud farming.
Okay.
And, but I will say that this is a nonpartisan issue. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason politically partisan on this. Some people are adamantly opposed to gambling. They're concerned about, the potential addictive issues and health issues assigned with it. The thing about as I understand it, though, about horse racing and dog racing is that over time they are not strong revenue producers. Yeah. Maybe the stud farming would be as a sort of a side business to it, but really a lot of people see it as an entree to cards and tables.
Yeah, I mean, there are major tracks in other states that have closed down over the years because of just what Liz is saying. But the fact is, Greg, is the state cutting off its nose to spite its face in terms of putting people in jobs and gaining some tax revenue?
Well, I'd say attitudes are changing. The AJC has done several polls that showed a narrow majority of voters support an expansion of gambling. And even the Republican Party 3 years ago did a non-binding ballot question that showed a surprising support of Republican voters were in favor of expansion of gaming. So there is that, but there's also the fact that Governor Sonny Perdue and then after him Governor Nathan Deal have both adamantly opposed any expansion of gambling, so that as far as we know, that hasn't changed anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, a transition on this, Leo. Governor Deal he does not have the power, should the legislature decide to approve this referendum, to take it to voters to allow horse racing. He doesn't have the power on the back end, but he sure has some power going in on the front end, doesn't he?
He does, and I think that Governor Deal, being the kind of governor who, I mean, he's almost sometimes like a plotter when it comes to risk taking, and do we do something too quickly? We will know what some of the constituents actually feel when we hear the animal rights people start to weigh in on this. When they start to weigh in, then that's a whole nother group of people that the governor is going to listen to and sort of weigh, is this something that we really want to get into?
Okay, let's talk a little more about gambling before we move on. This is the week we've talked on this show before about this proposed gaming establishment in South DeKalb County. The governor's already said he opposes it. That doesn't even have cash payouts. I mean, that would be, you'd get a voucher for dinner at this casino-like venue, maybe a stay at the hotel overnight. But what's happened in the meantime to that?
Well, the Cobb County Commission, which actually approved this by unanimous vote back in December, said the vote was invalidated, partly because one of the reasons was there's no commissioner for that region.
In that part of South DeKalb where the proposed gaming establishment would have been. Governor Deal could have appointed a commissioner for that to fill that district. And we should say that seat is empty, Liz, because of the drama playing out over the yeah, right, that we've got him under the chairman of the commission under indictment, and you've got a temporary guy from that South DeKalb district in his place.
Right, that's right. And I think the other thing, and we talked about it on this show, and just a few days afterwards, we saw DeKalb pull back on, change their opinion, is that when they approved it, when the commission approved it in DeKalb, it was very business and location specific. It wasn't a countywide ordinance, which would have brought in equal protection issues and the number of machines, which right now is limited under state government.
Video poker and that sort of
to 9 machines. But this was 425
right.
machines.
But my point is the governor really could have put somebody in that seat. Did he actually not want to fill that seat because he didn't want them to move forward with this, or is it a larger issue?
His argument is that it should be a special election for the seat.
We got that.
So it would be, and Lee May has his reasons for not wanting a special election, and there's a lot of maneuvering going on about what the future of that seat holds.
We should talk at some point. I know it's not statewide politics, but the politics of DeKalb County right now is about as interesting as anything in the state.
We have to have at least an hour.
We are out of time for our conversation tonight. Leo Smith, Greg Bluestein, Liz Flowers, it's a great pleasure to have you here with us. The Lawmakers is really grateful that you'd be part of this conversation. So day 15 of the 2015 legislative session is a wrap. We still have 25 long legislative days to go. The General Assembly isn't going to meet Monday because it's a President's Day holiday they're taking, but we'll be back next Tuesday to bring you all the latest from the state capitol. In the meantime, stay in touch with us on social media or email us at lawmakers@gpb.org. And remember, on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock on GPB Radio, Political Rewind will give you a look at all the week's political news. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Bill Nigut. Have a great evening.
This is a GPB original production.